If you are a wise adult, if you're a loving, caring adult in this child's life, your job, your responsibility to that kid is to tuck that away in the back of your mind and start paying closer attention to the things that they are saying and their behavior and what's going on with them, and see what else might slip out sideways that you might be able to catch. The reality is, a shockingly high percentage of children will deny that abuse happened to them, even when they are shown photographic evidence of their own abuse. The police can say to them, "This is a picture. This is your uncle. This is you." And the kids will say, that's not me. That never happened. The shame around this is so high that even given photographic evidence, kids deny it. So parents or leaders, if your kind of spidey senses are up around abuse, start paying better attention, and maybe don't completely fall for the kids saying, this is nothing. I was joking. I was talking about a movie, right? Like, just sort of keep your ears open. Last and final section on all of this. Parents who are listening, I know that one of the questions that comes up is, how can we better detect abuse? How can we better find out who has been abused? And I know that any of you who learned about a child or a teenager being abused, in your heart of hearts, you would do every single thing that you could to help that kid. I just want you to remember that the kids don't communicate that information to you very directly. You might have to ask some questions that are kind of uncomfortable. You might have to pry a little bit. You might have to ask questions that frankly make you a little bit scared, thinking, gosh, if somebody knew I was asking, this kid said this weird thing and it has to do with sex and I asked follow-up questions, you might feel extraordinarily hesitant to do that. And for children, that is most of the time how abuse is found out. So being unafraid to ask your own children, or children who you have some type of responsibility over, being able to ask some probing questions, I think is really important. You should also know that children, teenagers too, but children even more so, are notorious for giving a story and then taking it back when it comes to abuse. And that does not mean they're making it up or lying. In fact, you almost can expect it. They'll say something, you kind of like catch them in this weird thing that they're saying. And when you ask about it, they say, oh, no, I was just kidding. Or they distance themselves from it in some way. If you are a wise adult, if you're a loving, caring adult in this child's life, your job, your responsibility to that kid is to tuck that away in the back of your mind and start paying closer attention to the things that they are saying and their behavior and what's going on with them, and see what else might slip out sideways that you might be able to catch. The reality is, a shockingly high percentage of children will deny that abuse happened to them, even when they are shown photographic evidence of their own abuse. The police can say to them, this is a picture. This is your uncle. This is you. And the kids will say, that's not me. That never happened. The shame around this is so high that even given photographic evidence, kids deny it. So parents or leaders, if your kind of spidey senses are up around abuse, start paying better attention, and maybe don't completely fall for the kids saying, this is nothing. I was joking. I was talking about a movie, right? Like, just sort of keep your ears open. The other piece I want you to know right here is teenagers do the same thing. They accidentally leak out information, but they also do this sort of breadcrumbing scenario where a teenager might give you a tiny little piece of information about their abuse very deliberately, but it's small. It's one piece of a 10,000 piece puzzle, and they're going to slide one piece across the table to you, and it's a test. And they're going to see, are you going to freak out? Are you going to get real weird? Are you going to get real aggressive? Are you going to get mad at them? Are you going to ask questions in this like really aggressive kind of way or shaming way? And if any of that happens, I guarantee that teenager will pull that piece of information back and you will not get the next piece of the puzzle. If a teenager gives you a tiny piece of information, be open to the idea they've just given you a little breadcrumb trail, and your job is to follow it. They may not give you the whole story for a very long time, days, weeks, months. But when teenagers deliberately tell about their abuse, that's how they do it, and that's the pattern that you should be looking for. So like good-hearted adults of the world who say, I would do anything to help an abused kid, these are the things that you should be doing, knowing how to listen to kids. And I think, honestly, there's research that says children who grow up not only being like close to their own families, but having other adults in their lives who share their values, those kids are more likely to say things where their abuse could come out because they have adults in their lives that they trust. So if your kids are in a ward and they've got young men or young women leaders, like that is an additional layer of protection, additional people for them to talk to, even though you might feel like, oh gosh, my kids can talk to me. Sometimes even great kids can't. So that's how you look for abuse, the behaviors that adults need to do. Next section, the last little bit of this podcast, what they do in episode 6 is essentially talk about all the many reasons that people leave the church. And they do some interviews. None of them really had to do specifically with abuse. They were all kinds of reasons why people leave the church. The point of that episode appeared to be something like, this is a terrible church, and not only do they abuse kids and protect abusers, people would leave for all kinds of terrible reasons. I wish I had the time to kind of deconstruct all of those stories for you, and I just don't. The fact that people leave our church for a variety of reasons shouldn't come as a surprise to you. And one of the glorious things about our church is people have agency, right? As heartbreaking as it is, sometimes when a loved one leaves the church, they are allowed to do so. And it doesn't mean that the church itself is doing something wrong. It could mean a whole lot of things. It doesn't even mean that the person is doing something wrong or that they're being bad. There's a lot of reasons that people leave. This podcast, I have a beef right here, is they're trying to use all these stories of people leaving for many reasons to pin it all back on, and it's because of abuse. And it's not. They make that claim, and there's just no logic even to support it, and there's certainly no evidence to support it. So in review, Heaven's Helpline, 6 episodes, at least 3.5 of them are not about abuse at all. They're just kind of gripes and terrible stories of things that have happened in the church that are used to build up this sort of false case to say the church handles abuse terribly. The abuse cases that they do talk about are horrific. And I hope you've been able to see there is more to the story than you are being told. If you can step back enough and say, okay, it's still really bad, but it's not like it's being made out to be, it might help you just understand and think through that logically a bit more. I am available for questions or thoughts on this. You can email me, Jennifer@fairlettertosaints.org. Would be delighted to correspond with you. Look in the footnotes for all the sources that are cited here. Thank you very much for listening.